Hello everybody and welcome to Digital Cinematography Masterclass Week 2. I'm Tom Sternad, I'm the lead digital artist of the Creator Space. Want to thank everyone for joining us and also want to thank all our partners in making this project happen. We have Canada Council for the Arts, we have our library partners, Blue Mountains Public Library, Collingwood Public Library, and the Wasaga Beach Public Library. In terms of the equipment that we're demonstrating, so I'm using the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. And that camera is available through our library partners. So you can get that if you're a member of the Blue Mountains Public Library and Wasaga Beach Public Library. You just need to take a proficiency test, go to tbmcs.ca, scroll down, and you'll find the Blackmagic 4K camera proficiency test. It's online, finished answering all the questions, and you can also email me, tom@tbmcs.ca, if you have any questions about that as well. So that's the exciting part, that whatever we're demonstrating here, this is equipment that you can access through our library partners. So it's not just cinematography as, oh, I wish I could use that camera. This is a camera you can directly use. So we're really excited to be able to offer that through our library partners. So let's get right into it. So what are we going to look at today? So we're going to look at types of shots, and then we're going to have shot sizes and lens focal lengths, prime versus zoom lens, and shot angles, shot reverse shot. We'll have a bit of time for some Q&A. And once again, you can always email me at tom@tbmcs.ca. I'm just going to put that in the chat here. And send me questions if you have any questions about tech, equipment, and anything that we talk about here. Great thing is you can rewatch this, so if you're not able to stay in for the whole session, you can always rewatch this later, and we're going to have this on our YouTube channel, but it will stay right here on Vimeo for future use. So that's the really great news, that it will be available. So let's get right into this. So different shot sizes. So if you think about what you're seeing right now, this type of a shot would be a medium close-up. So it's not really right on my face, but you can still kind of see my shoulders. This would be kind of one type of shot. So that's a good thing to start thinking about. What is the type of shot you're watching all the time, whether it's webinars, TV shows, films, and we want to start thinking about that creatively. What kinds of shots are other filmmakers using, other directors using? What kind of shots are they using? How will you use shots to tell your story? So we're trying to think about how can we use shots to tell different stories. And that's part of the goal here. But also shots and what they can mean and so on. But the one thing that we need to figure out is, how do we create these shots? We can talk about medium close-ups, all this for as long as we want to, but we need to figure out how can we create these shots, and that's what we're going to look at today. How do we actually technically create them in terms of how do we achieve them? Okay, so let's get right into types of shot sizes. So in digital cinematography, we can create images with subjects in different sizes, or framing, and that's an important term here too. Sometimes it's just about framing. Could be the type of shot size. So you'll think a lot about that. You'll hear that, like, what kind of frame do I want? You see people do that, like, I want this kind of frame moving in and out. And it's a really great tool to think of it, that same idea is, by moving the frame closer and wider, we're changing perspective of what the shot is. And that's the same idea with lenses. Think of them as a big telescope. You can go, wider, closer, and that's the idea. Telephoto, telescope, wide. Think of a GoPro. So you got like your fisheye to a telescope, and those are those lens sizes and everything in between. And that's how we can achieve these shots. So that's the really fun part there. So, you can have wide shots all the way to extreme close-ups. Then shot sizes, they help to tell the story. They also provide details, such as, where are we in a wide shot? So, by showing that we're in a city in a wide shot, we know that we're in a city. So that's establishing that story. And also it gives us the fine details in a close-up. What are the little details that we need to see in this close-up? So that's what shot sizes can help us do. Here's a chart. We've used this a bit in the past workshops as well, but just an idea of the different types of shot sizes. So we have extreme long shots, we have very long shots, long shot, medium long shot. You can see the medium long shot, that's a very typical type of shot. Knees to the top of the head. Mid shot, kind of waist above. Medium close-up, like I was saying, basically if you think about, I'm in that kind of medium close-up, getting the chest and above, right? So that's kind of a comparison, medium close-up. Close-up, Again, that would be more of like this on me, right? That kind of a close-up, and then going to a big close-up, full head, extreme close-up, getting those details like the eye. So you can see from all the way from a far bridge, that is extreme long shot showing us where we are. We're underneath a highway in a bridge. So just like we could establish we're in a city, or a wider shot, we establish where we are here. So those are those types of things where we can establish, okay, like here we are in the studio today. This is the extreme wide shot, right? So we can show it in that kind of manner, and then back into this kind of a shot right here, right? And then like the details. So we're looking at the details of the camera, right there. That's like that extreme close-up type thing. Detailed the lens that we're going to look at today. So again, those really cool things. So going really wide and then going to a medium shot, right? And that's how we can tell stories. So we can do that with a multitude of different lenses, and then also angles of cameras. So shot sizes and focal length. And this is the fun thing. Lenses have different focal lengths. So the longer they are, the more zoomed in they are, or telephoto they are. So the smaller they are, so you can have things as small as 6.5 millimeters. We have a fisheye lens. And like this is the same idea. This is a fisheye lens, so super small, right? And then on this, you're looking at a 35 millimeter at me. And that's the difference between 7.5 millimeters to 35 millimeters. And they're the same distance, just different angles in the room here, but same distance to me, about a meter away from me. And look at the big difference between the two. 1 meter away, huge. Fisheye sees everything, super wide. And this feels more like you're sitting across me. And that's the fun thing. So I made a note here. 35 millimeters is often viewed as the general human eyesight. And then you think of 16 millimeters or less as a wide angle. And then you get under 10 millimeters, you start to get into that fisheye lens concept. 50 millimeters is often referred to as the portrait lens. And 85 millimeters is a telephoto lens. That's great for close-ups and getting details from far away. So that's the idea. It's not just the shot size. We can take any lens. I can take any lens. I can move this camera. I can come closer. I can come further away, right? We can get different shot sizes like that. That's one way to get shot sizes. The other thing is I can keep the camera right where it is and change the types of lenses and get different shot sizes. And that's really the goal of digital cinematography, is to try to use these focal lengths to tell the story. Or you might decide that you just want to use one lens, a 35 millimeter, and tell everything with that. And that's a creative decision. And what it's going to do is create a certain specific look. That lens has a specific look and feel versus the fisheye lens. So if I was going to tell a story all with a fisheye lens, that's going to be very different too than with a human eyesight of a 35 millimeter type lens, right? So very, very different types of storytelling. So you could say, hey, I'm going to do my whole film with a fisheye lens and shoot everything like that. So everything's wide and people can look around where they want to. Or I'm going to use something more like this where it's directional and I'm kind of focusing people on what they want to see and how it can work and that kind of idea, right? So it's a choice. You can make shot sizes with one single lens, or you can use it with a combination of using different focal lengths. And we're going to look at how that's possible today and as we demo through this. So prime versus zoom lens. So what we've tried to do is in the kits with our libraries and the cameras, we offer the prime lenses. So they're fixed focal lengths. So a 35 millimeter lens is only a 35 millimeter lens. And that's like, it's basically like these things right here. So these are the lenses, these types of lenses, different prime lenses. So this is a 24 millimeter, and that's what it is. It's 24 millimeters, and that's that. And then you'll see I have attached on the camera, our demo camera here, the aspect right here, this camera, I have a zoom lens. So the lens can actually change. So I can actually I can zoom in, I can zoom out. So I can change the nature of the lens of what it is. So by zooming in, zooming out, I'm able to change that nature of what the focal length of the lens is. So that's, I think, a 35 to 105 millimeter lens. So that's that kind of idea where you can have a zoom lens and it can zoom in or out. So you're changing the focal length. And that creates a move in the lens move, and without moving the camera physically, you can zoom in. Traditionally, that's used in documentary films, news, sports, and prime lenses are more commonly used in narrative films and dramatic television. These are not rules, but these are the general area where you're going to find these types of lenses used. So zooms and primes and that idea. Now primes tend to usually be what's called a bit faster, so they let more light in, versus a zoom lens is usually a bit slower because the nature of creating this kind of telescope lens will require that. So just when we start to look at a little bit, we're going to get into exposure in the next session, but when we start to look at these the lenses here, I'm going to just see if we can kind of see through that. So see how we close and we open? So that can be open quite a bit, and these are 1.5, so an f1.5 f-stop, so super light sensitive, versus the zoom lens usually starts at 3.5. So it's about a good stop less of light. So you need way more light to go into it in order to make it work. So you need more light on a zoom lens than you would on a prime lens. So that's another difference between the two types of lenses, that the prime lenses tend to be faster because they're just designed to let the light in, and versus a zoom will usually be bigger and there's more optics because there's the piece of glass that's moving in the zoom to change the focal lengths, and that takes a bit of light away, and that's something to consider, a zoom versus prime, right? So it could also be aesthetic, but it could also be practical. Will this work? Does it work? And how will it work? Shot angles. So now we can start to think about different angles. So just like we're looking at this is one angle right on me. This angle is over here. It's about 45 degrees away from me, maybe 50 degrees. And those are two angles, right? So we got like this angle to this angle, two different angles. And although that camera is not pointed at me, but you can see can it cut? And this is the big question as digital cinematographers. We can tell the story through different shot sizes, but we also want to make sure that the shots can work together because we're capturing different shots in an effort to make them all be able to cut together. If they won't cut together, that could be a problem. What's the point of having a bunch of different shots if it's not going to look good if you cut it together? So we're still working towards an edited final film or video, and that's the big question. Will this shot cut with the previous shot, or will it cut in general? So if you're getting 5 shots and they're all from the same angle, they might not cut well if it's using the same lens and the same distance. So you can imagine if I got a shot like this, and then I got a shot like this, that's going to be what's called a jump cut, because I'm basically going from here to here, and that camera maybe just moved a little bit, or I'm moving a little bit, but that's a jump, right? But if I'm like this, and then all of a sudden, even if I'm closer, that can cut. And that's what comes into the next concept here is, will it cut together? So a basic way to use 2 shots in editing is to have a wide shot and then cut into a closer shot, just like what I'm saying there. If I moved in and the focus, I know it needs to be adjusted, but that's referred to as a punch in. So I'm literally punching in from a wide to punching in a bit closer, right? So, and that could be done with that focal length. So I can go on the 35, maybe I go to a 50 millimeter, 85 millimeter to punch in. So I'm not changing the angle, I'm just changing the characteristics of the shot size so it punches in. And that feels good in terms of editing, that it doesn't look like it's a big jump, versus if I'm just here and then I'm just like, I move a little bit, that's a jump just with the person moving. The camera didn't move, but I'm in the same shot, right? So you can't really cut those together smoothly, right? You can always decide that you want to work with jump cuts and that's your style, that's fine. But in terms of the greater picture of, will people enjoy watching it? Will it detract from the story? Understand that a jump cut can be really disjarring and maybe not really cinematically attractive in terms of the story flow from going one shot to the next. So this way, by changing the punch in, by going from that to a bit, like to double right into my face, that punch in can cut well. And another way that you can make it work, or will it cut, is to change camera angles. So again, taking this camera and taking this camera, different camera angles. So that's fine. That's going to cut because we're in such different camera angles. It's not jarring because I'm going from close, the medium close up to the extreme wide shot, right? So that can cut together because we're at different angles. And that's the idea here, is that if you have about 45 degrees of an angle, that allows the different angle to cut together. So, you know, if you, and also combined that with a slightly, you know, a change of the shot size, getting closer, further away, plus a degree in movement in the camera angle, those two combined will create a spectacular combination of two shots that will cut together really well. So again, you know, from here to here, great, two different shot sizes, two different angles, and you know that will ultimately cut well together, except for one thing, and that's the next thing we're going to look at, is the 180-degree rule. So another important rule is that the shot angles are used to create an imaginary axis line or a 180-degree angle range. So if you think of this as a wall, so right now, if you're looking at me like this, and then on this side, there's literally a wall, right? So that works. So I wouldn't put a camera on this side of the wall, and that becomes the line, right? But I can have cameras all around me, right? So for example, if I'm gonna just move the wider shot here, and then I'll move it back after. But this is kind of more of an angle now. So see how that kind of looks the same? I got like that shot to this shot. That's looking like a little bit more like, okay, you're looking at me, and now you're looking at the side of me. And this wall is 180 degrees. So if I put this camera over here, it could be confusing in that 180-degree rule. So if I'm here, the camera can move all the way around me, right? But I wouldn't want a camera on this side. And this is a great chart. So if you think about, here's two characters, and you see the camera on the left and right, behind them, over the shoulders, and then they can move anywhere in that 180 degrees. So I'd like to call this a hockey game rule. So if you think about, if there's a game of hockey and there's a net on the left and right in this diagram, and the puck's going from one side to the other. If you are looking at the camera that's at the bottom center, you see the puck going from screen left to screen right. But if you flip to the other degree, and you went where the wall is, so all of a sudden, so if you see the camera going like this, and you flip to the other side, the puck is now going to be going this way in the other shot, right? So the puck will be going this way. If you flip to the 180 rule, it will look like the puck's going back in the other direction. That's why sports, they always have cameras from one side, leaving the other side as the 180-degree wall. So that way you constantly see where the action's going, left to right, as if you're watching there. So think of the audience as they're watching. You don't want to confuse them. So if they're watching from this perspective, if you flipped it, the person on the other side seeing a different perspective than this person, right? But it's relative knowing spatially where you are in a location that you understand that they're going from the home side to the away side, for example, and that's that 180-degree rule, right? So that's just something to think about, the 180-degree rule, the hockey game rule. And then the last thing here is, in doing that, you create something called shot, reverse shot. And that's a very nice common technique. And it's illustrated in this 180-degree rule, where you see the two characters at a table. And it's known as shot, reverse shot, and that's capturing one person or actor from that one angle, and then reversing the shot into a mirror image, an identical pivot at 180 degrees to show the second person or actor. The shots are the same, but they're also reversed. So you can see that the character's on the screen left, and then Audrey Hepburn's on screen right in the second shot. So that's the first shot, and then the reverse shot. It's the reverse of what you see in the first shot. So we'll hear that a lot, shot, reverse shot. And these are some really great techniques. So we get into 180-degree rule, shot sizes, different angles they can cut together, and then they can be clean, so there'd be no shoulder of the other person, or over the shoulder as you see in this image. And that's the really cool thing, is that it can be totally clean, so this is clean, or there could be, you know, I guess it would be right here, there could be someone's shoulder right here. So imagine if I'm talking to someone like this, their shoulder would be like there, and I'd be talking like that would be the camera angle, and then the reverse would be, I'd be on the other side, and then the person, there'd be another person here. So you can see it would be a mirror image, right? So that's the idea. I'm on screen left, and then I'm on screen right. And those are those two shot reverse shot images, right? So that's really, really fun, interesting techniques. And it all comes to play into, as we look at digital cinematography, how do we create these different shots? How do we make them work? Okay, so let's look at some of these concepts. So we're going to use the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. So I have it set up right here. Here's the camera right here. I'm going to just cut over to it. We have a similar scene like we did last week. I'm just going to spin this camera over here. And we're going to get, let's see, went to the wrong shot here. Here we go. So here's the camera. You can see, and we got a zoom lens here on the front. Just going to spin this around. So this is a zoom lens, and you can see this goes from 35, it says here on the top, to 105. So by spinning that, that's the difference with the zoom lens. It has an actual zoom side, not just the focus that's usually here on the front, is where we're just focusing, right? The shot. But now we're able to actually zoom to go to 105, right? All the way to 35, right? So that's the really cool thing. So I'm just going to move it back here. We can see the shot. This is the shot I'm getting. Okay, so this is 35 millimeters on the zoom, and I have a maximum aperture of 3.5 in this situation. Right, so we got the shot right here. I'm just going to spin this up a little bit here so you can see. Right, so that's kind of what's going on there, and I'm realizing the power is not plugged in here to this one. Right, so we got all of that running. Just redo this power here. We just seem to not be getting the power out to the camera. Let's make sure we have lots of juice. And we seem to have, let's see, seem to have turned it off. There we go. Okay, now we got lots of power. Good. Wanted to make sure we're not going to run out of power there. So always make sure we got a nice full battery. So we got that charging nicely. Good. Okay, so let's cut to our angle here. So here's our, on the 35. Now I'm going to go to 50. See how that's getting in closer? And we just want to make sure we're in focus. Right? And so this would be what could be a punch-in. So if you went like this, you went to the 50, that would be like what you could directly do as a punch-in. So, you know, going from that, the wider right into the punch-in, that could work really, really well. Right? And then, here I'm at the 70, and you can see what's happening here is the longer the lens, look how our background is getting more and more out of focus, essentially. It's becoming really distinct that that background is not in focus. So that's a real characteristic here, is that as the lenses become longer in focal length, we're getting more out of focus in the background. That's one of the characteristics of what we see that way, right? And now, and that's all the way to the 105. And then you can see here, I have to now decide what's in focus. So we're that long of a lens that the depth of field, so what's in focus, so that range of what's in focus. So what is it in focus from here to here? So the goat there and the globe is probably only this far away from each other, but I'm actually having to shift focus from the globe to the goat, and the goat's behind the globe, right? So I have to decide, is the globe in focus or is the goat in focus? And that's a characteristic of the telephoto lens, is that once I'm at 105 millimeters, right, and here they're both in focus. So there's a greater depth of field. It's not as shallow. And again, the depth of field is deciding what's in focus from here to here. It could be from here to 5 meters. It could be from here to the end of the room. Everything could be in focus. And we're going to talk about that when we get to exposure next week more. But we just want to look at that depth of field concept with our lenses currently and how that really works right now. So that's pretty cool, right? So that's going from our 35 to 105. So you can just see on the camera here that zooming in and out, right? And I'm just spinning it in and out in a zoom. So that's fantastic, okay? So now let's introduce some different lenses. So I'm just going to click on the front here. I'm taking the lens off, right? So I'm able to just take the zoom off, and this is what the zoom looks like. So just, it's an older Canon FD zoom, but you can see it's usually a lot longer than what a prime is, right? So I'm going to take that one off, and now what I'm going to do is, I just got to put this adapter on. So it's a micro 4/3 mount, and I have EF lenses. So the Blue Mountains Public Library Blackmagic system works on that same principle, that it has EF lenses that are going on a micro 4/3 mount. So there's an adapter. For the Wasaga Beach Library cameras, for those lenses, they're directly micro 4/3 mounts. And I have one of them here, the 50mm. So we'll look at that. So I'm going to just line up, there's red dots to the red dot. And let me just show you that. So we have that, there's that little red dot up here. And there's a red dot on the front here of the lens adapter here. So you just match them and you mount them together. Okay, and right now what I'm going to start with, here's a 10mm lens. I'm just going to open this all the way up. And this is what the 10mm looks like. So again, you can see super wide, super wide. It's not really a fisheye, like we're not really distorting versus, here, this one's more of a fisheye where we're really distorting. But here's the 10mm, so super wide, establishing shot. So it's showing us that the globe is in some sort of computer type environment, sitting on a wooden pedestal. So it establishes a lot, right? So you see a lot in there. We don't really even know that there's a globe to focus on. So you can see that's part of it too, is that by using the different lenses, we can actually make, a focal point of where we're trying to lead people's eyes, what they should be looking at. Okay, so now I'm going to take that 10mm off, and basically with that, the depth of field on a wide lens like that is super wide, long. So it's it's really everything's going to be in focus with something like that. It's definitely a wide, long depth of field, deep depth of field, not a shallow. So now I'm just putting on the 16mm. So this is a lens that is available through the, so here's the 16mm versus the 10mm. So it's a little bit less wide, but you start to get into there can be a little bit of focus now. So I'm pretty wide open here. So I'm at a 2.8. Right, and again, you can see the prime, it's a bit brighter than when we were first with the zoom, because it does have that extra stop. So if we recall, we're going to just go down to, let's say 800 here, to compensate so that it's just that stop less that we need. So we can start to see what's in focus. So there's, again, everything's in focus in this super wide shot, which is a 7.5mm fisheye, right? Versus the 16mm. We have the foreground to the background in focus in there, right? So that's the characteristic of the 16mm. Okay, let's go to the next one. Let's keep going with this. This is actually quite a lot of fun just to throw all the different lenses on and see. It's always nice to kind of see what all the different results are of what you're getting with these, right? So this is the 16mm. Next, so I'm going to go to a 24mm. This is something that I have. These are all of my own lenses here, my own personal collection. I have a 24mm, so I'll just put it on. The library kits don't have a 24 millimeter, but we're just going to travel kind of through what I have. Same with the 10 millimeter. That's not something that the library. So there's the library kits contain 16, 35, 50, and 85. So those are the 4 lens types that are in the library with the library. Okay, so let's go to this one. So now we have the 24 millimeter. Notice as we're getting closer here. I'm just going to go down to the 2.8, which is where we were there before. Okay, so notice again, now we're getting into, again, look at, that's the background, and that's the globe in focus and the background, right? So the depth of field is shallower, right? Like that background that's about 3 meters away from the globe is now starting to be out of focus on the 24 millimeter. So notice that the wider we go, let's just go back to the 2.8. The wider we go with the lens, the more, the wider the depth of field, right? And now we're shrinking that depth of field so that only the globe or the background's in focus. It's not going to be both. And that's, I think, really cool that we're able to do that. So that's the 24 millimeter. Okay, so let's go switch it over to the 35 millimeter. That's the next one coming up. 35 millimeter. Let's get that one on. So again, red dot to red dot, click, we know it's on, right? So this is the 35 millimeter right here. So again, you have always the focus here, and then we have the iris here. We're gonna get into that more again next week with the exposure side of things. So that'll be really, really fun to look at. Okay, so here's this shot. So look at the 35 millimeter. Look how much closer we are. And notice again, the depth of field now is, again, going from the background to the globe is very distinctly moving apart, right? And we're getting more and more of a blur in that background for a shallower depth of field, right? So, you know, similar to the zoom, but again, the prime is gonna have a little bit more play with that depth of field. And it requires less light. So we went from an ISO of 1250 in the zoom, and now I'm just working with an ISO of 800, right? So that's something to note too, as we switch over, okay? So let's go, that was our 35. So again, that's a very good typical lens to work with in terms of, you know, what is the, you know, the human eye? What does the human eye see? And how does it behave? Right? So now we're going to go to, let's go to our 50. So this one I actually have as a micro 4/3 model. So I'm just going to switch this adapter off. So this is a little adapter that adapts the EF, Canon EF mount to micro 4/3 mount. Now I'm going to go straight with the 50 onto the camera here. And it's going to get it down to the 2.8. Okay, so here's our 50. Check this out. So that's really interesting, right? Like now we're getting into, you know, really a lot closer of a detail here. And this lens is a really, really fast lens. This is a 1.1, f1.1, so super, super fast lens. So look how much more blur there is again in that background, right? So really, really shallow depth of field. We have like just like this much is in focus in that shot when it comes down to it. I have to start to be selective too. Like, is it, you know, how much more of the globe versus the goat? I can just get them both in focus, and they're basically just about 10 to 15 centimeters distance apart, right? And now we start to look at the little details. So I just put those coasters there, and you know, it's a little. It says mule sauce. It's just from the Sticker Mule company, coasters for drinks. And see, that's why you start to get into these closer shots, because it reveals information that you wouldn't see. Previously, you wouldn't really see what was on that coaster. So that could be something important for the narrative of your film, using that kind of a coaster to tell that story, right? So that's what you got to start to think of, is what kind of details are on that setting, that setup, that you might need to showcase. Okay, so that was the 50. Well, that's a very nice lens. You know, very much used for like that kind of portrait style work. And I know in a previous masterclass of digital cinematography that we had in person, we did some shots. I'm going to showcase those next week. The 50 millimeter was always a really nice looking shot lens for doing interviews. So it's a really, really nice lens. I like using also the 85. So this is the 85. Again, another one that's directly available through the library kit. So I'm going to click that one. I got to put that adapter back on, almost forgot. So the micro 4/3 to EF mount adapter, red to red, and same with the actual EF lens. I'm going to put that on. And we'll notice the 85 is not necessarily that much closer, but definitely a bit closer than the 50, right? So we get into this kind of shot. Now, there's a little bit of play here because I'm using the EF mount and the direct micro 4/3 mount, so they're behaving a little bit differently. So the 50 and so on. So let's gonna move this guy a little bit closer here. So let's see. So we can start to look at what happens if we're moving the shots closer. But look at this. I have to actually now go from, this focus to having the gold in focus. So that's out of focus and getting the gold in focus, getting the globe in focus, getting the coasters in focus. So they all have, the depth of field is really shallow here. We have about 5 centimeters play here. But look at that, a lot closer, beautiful, the 85 millimeter, really nice to get different shot sizes that way, right? So we're getting really, really close in there. I think that's key here. So now I have this camera on a tripod, right? So now we can move around for shot sizes, right? So, traditionally that's fine. You can put the 85, but with a prime, you can't just zoom in to reframe. You have to actually move the camera to get the type of shot you want, right? So that's the really fun thing. So here I moved it closer, right? And maybe I want this kind of a shot, right? But I have to move the camera physically in closer in order to get that shot, right? So I took the camera from here, I moved it about half a meter, or about a half a meter closer. And now I'm that much closer to get a different angle, right? So you can physically move this. Now let's go, why don't I go all the way over here? I'm gonna go into this different angle here. I'm just kind of live demoing this, and look at that. I can decide that's the angle I want, right? So see, that's how we can start to change our angles from point A, which was all the way over here, right? And then I moved it over here about 30 degrees, and it's on an 85 millimeter lens like that, right? So that really helps showcase that. So look at that, by just those different angles, different lenses really help to be able to change, the story, how we're telling the story and the different types of angles. So, let's go again a little bit more of an angle. So I'm just going to kind of shift it all the way over here. So a good 45 degrees, still kind of in focus there. So we've gone from all the way over here to all the way over there. And that's a really good angle difference of, a solid 45 degree shift. So look, now we can see the goat more clearly head on. Right? And let's go back. I'm going to just do this kind of real time here. So let's go back to our original spot. And I just got to adjust it. And that was our original spot, right? So you can see the goat is kind of looking away, right? And then when I go over here, the goat's almost looking at us. Right? So just fun with those angles, how we can move angles around and make things work differently. And, that really keeps things going. So just by shifting around, right? And let's go the other way. So I'm going to go all the way over on the other side of the room here. Got to make sure I got enough of my HDMI cable that's connected for you guys to see, right? And I'm going to go this way and check this out. So now the goat's away from us. right? So I'm changing angles, right? And this, again, maybe this isn't the best way to cut. So if I have this kind of an angle, that's fine. And to show this way, and then let's spin it around to kind of back to where we were here in the front, right? And then what I would do at that point is also, right? So we've gone from A to B, right? Not that much of a different angle, but watch if what about if we change this over and I go back to the 35. So let's go from the 18 to the 35. And there's our 35, right? Okay, so now let's just get a couple samples of this. So I'm going to record this. So let's say that's our first shot. Okay. And then I'm going to spin it over here on the 35. And we're just going to kind of see what works. I say, okay, is that going to work? Okay, I'm going to just record that piece right there. And that's what that looks like. Okay, and now let's just have a look. I'm going to go in the playback mode here. I'm going to go, there's the first shot. There's that shot. And there's this shot, right? It could cut, but let's instead go to the 85. So going from the wide to the 85. So we're going to do angle plus changing the lens to an 85. Okay, I'm going to record this part right here. So this is our shot now. Okay, we've recorded that. And now let's have a look. We're going to have kind of two options here. So this is that punch in going from 35 to 85. That cuts nice. But look at going from this one, from the front to that one, that cuts really well. So we've changed the angle. We've changed the angle, plus we've changed the focal length from the 35 millimeter to the 85 millimeter. That combination, angle plus shot size or focal length, that could just be, we could take the 35, we can move closer and further in, further out. Those combinations of angle plus shot size, what kind of framing we're doing, makes for really great cutting capable shots. Also, just doing the punch in isn't a bad thing either. Look at this. This works quite well too, 35 to 85. That will cut well. And that gives us the detail, maybe a detail on the map, right? So that's a really nice combo of shots that we can go from 35 to the 85, right? Okay, so just one more thing I just want to get in today is, let's go back. I'm going to go back to the 35. And let's just say, for argument's sake, we want to shoot everything just with a 35. How can we do that? Because sometimes you'll hear people talking about a film that they made, they only shot with one main lens, right? So let's go back to the 35. So here's our 35. Right, it's going to go into focus. Always check your focus. It's really important, having everything in focus. Okay, so there's our 35. So watch this. If I can move around. I can go further out, kind of live as we go. And again, then you just have to adjust your focus, the distance. So I can go like that. That can be one shot. Okay, I'm just going to record that. Okay, and then I can move in a bit closer. Okay, and I'm going to move in one more step closer, just to make sure I have enough cable here. and maybe on a little bit more of an angle. Okay, so now I've gone from, different positions, and I've moved it around. Now let's have a look at what that looks like. So here's the last angle, and I'm just going to go to playback mode here, and we can see these shots. So here's the first shot, here's the second shot. So this is all in the 35. So I go from a wide to a medium close-up, like a punch in like that, bit of an angle change, and I'm going even closer. So you can see there, what we've done is, we're not changing the lens, but we can use a 35, but now we have to move the camera around with this prime lens. We can't zoom in, we can't change its characteristics, but we can just move it around and angle it and do the same kind of idea. But isn't it great when you can just take the 35mm, change it to an 85mm, and still work from the distance that you are originally without having to move that much closer in? But, we have this option available. And that's the really cool thing about when we're working with something like this 35mm, is that it has a really close focusing range. I can be in focus there, and we can focus from the globe to the goat, from the globe to the goat. And I'm only, let me go back to this wide shot. This is how close we are to the subject from the camera. So we're about 30 centimeters or a foot away from the camera to the subject, right? And that's the great thing about 35mm. Those kinds of wider lenses usually have closer focus ranges. In the 85mm, I believe you need to be a meter away for it to be in focus at all. That's the closest you can be. These ones you can get really close. The 35, the 24, or a 16mm. You get really, really close, and same with the real fisheye lenses like the 10mm. You can go really, really, really close. Cool. Okay, so that's pretty much covering what I wanted to get into today, and I think that's a fantastic overview of what we can do, and I was glad I can get this to to really showcase what's possible, with these lenses and things. I think what I just wanted to show here is that if I take this off, this is, I think, important, is that this will always tell you the minimum focal range, right? So you can see it's a 1.5, and then what it's going to tell you here is I can go all the way to 30 centimeters. Let's see, that's in focus there. So 30 centimeters. All the way to infinity. So after about 3 meters, then everything's in focus. So that's always the fun thing about the lenses. So you can see the infinity 3 meters, and then anything more than that, everything's in focus. So the closest I can be, this always tells you the closest you can be is 0.3, right? And that's on the metric side. So 0.3, 30 centimeters, 0.3 meters, or 1 foot, right? So there's imperial and metric measurements there. And then you're going further away, 3 meters, and then you go into infinity, basically, where everything's beyond 3 meters is in focus, right? So that's really important. Now, let's take the same look at the 85mm. Okay, so here's the 85mm. And you'll see the infinity starts at 15 meters. So it's a little bit different. But look, the closest we can be is 1.1 meters. That's the closest. So a big difference between 30 centimeters or 0.3 meters and 1.1. That much closer we can be with those, with something that's a bit wider. And then the infinity, after 15 meters and beyond, we're in focus. So if your subject's 15 meters away, then pretty much the whole background can start to be in focus as well. So we're going to get into that next week. That's a really exciting part, is getting to those aspects of the lens characteristics, and that will be the next week when we start to look at some of the exposure and characteristics of lenses with that. So that'll be definitely into next week's class. So yeah, I want to, thanks again for joining us. Really fantastic, fun process of going through the lenses, showcasing what's possible, how they can work. And, we'll continue this journey next week. So make sure if you haven't signed up, sign up for weeks 3 and 4, still 2 more sessions. If you missed first week, you can rewatch it right here on this link. Definitely want to thank all our partners in this project for making this happen. Canada Council for the Arts, our library partners where you can access this amazing equipment that I've just showcased. So again, like I said, these lenses are my own collection. The library will have 16 millimeter, 35 millimeter, 50 millimeter, and 85 millimeter. Those are your options for the prime lenses in the kit available through the library. You can also access, there's a Canon 6D camera, photo camera, that has a 24 to 105 millimeter. So in the Blue Mountains Public Library, that photo camera lens could be used on the Blackmagic EF adapter lens too. So that's something, kind of a fun option that we built in there with those particular kits as well. So always you can consider that too. If you have your own micro four thirds lenses or EF lenses, just make sure if you have questions about adapters or adding your own lenses, please send me an email. Happy to discuss what's possible, how it can work, and just to make sure you're using things properly and safely. Happy to have that kind of a discussion with you before you go and venture out into using the equipment. So thanks again for joining us. Really had fun going through all of those lenses today. And again, you can rewatch this, watch week 1, and please check out these cameras available through our library partners. Feel free to take them out, try this out, do the same idea, set it up, try it out with all the different lenses, and recreate what we did today, and see how that can work in terms of the different shot sizes, and practice those angles and making that work. So thanks again for joining us, and I'll see you next week for week 3. All the best.